I am a member of the pirate generation. You know, this one sentence from author Stephen Witt just perfectly captures a moment in time. If you came of age in the late 90s or the early 2000s, you know exactly what he's talking about. Remember those hard drives filled not with photos, but with thousands and thousands of songs?
But it makes you wonder, right? It's a question we probably never even stopped to ask back then. We were all downloading the music, but where did it actually come from? It wasn't magic. It felt like this huge anonymous thing happening all at once, but the real story, well, it's a lot more specific and way more interesting.
Okay, so let's get into it, because this isn't just some story about technology. This is the secret history of the MP3. It's an incredible story about inventors, moguls, and one lone factory worker who pretty much brought a billion-dollar industry to its knees.
To really understand how this whole revolution happened, you have to look at three completely different worlds with three key players who were all on a massive collision course with each other. We've got the inventor, the executive, and the pirate.
So, first up, meet Karlheinz Brandenburg. This guy is this brilliant German engineer who obsessed for years over audio compression. He was a pure scientist, you know, all about the data. He absolutely hated the politics of business, and he would pretty soon find himself completely outmaneuvered by them.
And then we've got Doug Morris. For a while there, this man was the undisputed king of the music world. A super charismatic corporate climber who went from being a songwriter all the way to the head of the largest music company on earth. And his entire empire was built on selling shiny plastic discs.
And finally, our third player, and honestly, the most unlikely person in this whole story, Del Glover. A part-time worker at a CD manufacturing plant in this small town in North Carolina. He was just a guy who loved cars, rap music, and computers, and who, almost by accident, became the single most prolific music pirate in history. And this is exactly why that collision was so explosive. Think about it. The CD was a physical thing. It was expensive to make, and it degraded every time you scratched it. But the MP3, Brandenburg's invention, was the total opposite. It was a weightless file, literally 1/12 the size, that you could copy perfectly, infinitely, for free. So Del Glover, a guy whose whole paycheck depended on making CDs, here's his first MP3, and he asks this simple but totally devastating question. And it's a question the entire music industry had absolutely no answer for. So, this is the crucial part. How did the music get out? The industry thought they had the whole supply chain on lockdown, but it turns out the biggest leak of all came from the most secure place imaginable, the factory floor. And the method was so simple, it was kind of genius.
Okay, so get this. Glover figured out that all the overstock CDs were supposed to be destroyed, but nobody was actually counting them. Now, the discs themselves were too big to hide, but he noticed something. Security guards never made you take off your belt buckle, even when the metal detector wand went off. So he just slipped a CD behind his big buckle, walked right out, and then he did it again and again for 8 years.
But Glover wasn't just hoarding this music for himself. He was the main supplier for an elite piracy group called RNS, and they were not quiet about it. Their release notes, like this one for a huge Eminem album they leaked weeks early, were just pure swagger. It was a taunt to their rivals and a giant middle finger to the industry itself.
Now, you can bet the Empire was not going to take this lying down. But their response, it was this crazy mix of aggression, total confusion, and a staggering failure to see what was happening right in front of them.
Let's talk numbers for a second. $10 billion. That's what Doug Morris's parent company paid for another music giant, Polygram, back in 1998. This was the absolute peak of the CD era. They really, truly thought the party would never end.
So in the official prospectus for that $10 billion deal, you know, the document that's supposed to forecast the future of music, they didn't mention the internet. Not a single word about broadband or personal computers or the MP3. It was one of the biggest blind spots in corporate history.
You don't even have to take my word for it. Doug Morris himself admitted it years later with this incredible quote. He said they didn't miss the technology, they just had absolutely no idea what to do with it. They were music guys, not tech guys, and they were just completely unprepared for the fight.
So what did they do? They sued their own customers. The RIA, the industry's big trade group, filed thousands of lawsuits, which they had the nerve to call educational, against college kids, single moms, basically anyone they could find. It was a total public relations nightmare that made them look like absolute bullies.
But while they were busy alienating their customers,
a much more serious threat was forming behind the scenes. All that industry lobbying paid off, and the FBI launched this massive global investigation called Operation Fastlink.
And who was their #1 target? The most prolific, most arrogant, and most damaging group of them all, RNS. So the feds started building their case, slowly, painstakingly untangling this web of anonymous screen names to find the real people behind them.
And that investigation, after 5 long years, led them all the way to the parking lot of the CD factory in North Carolina. As Del Glover was leaving his morning shift, agents drew their guns. Special Agent Peter Vu stepped forward and said, "I've been looking for you for a long time." The game was up.
And the fallout was swift. Just like that, it was over. Key members of RNS were arrested. The factory in Kings Mountain that once pressed 500,000 CDs a day was shut down. Its equipment sold for scrap. Doug Morris was eventually forced out. An entire era was finished.
So after all that chaos, all the lawsuits and the arrests, a totally new world emerged from the rubble. Which, of course, begs the question, who actually came out on top?
I mean, the transformation was just radical. Recorded music suddenly wasn't king anymore. Live shows were. Digital sales finally overtook physical CDs, and streaming, which once seemed like a fantasy, became a billion-dollar business. The whole landscape was changed forever. And the most incredible fact in all of this is that Del Glover, a guy working grueling overtime shifts just to pay child support, had completely outsmarted the most powerful executives in the world using nothing more than a belt buckle.
So, what's the takeaway here? Well, Karlheinz Brandenburg and the engineers, they got rich off the licensing fees. Doug Morris and the executives, they lost their empire, but they adapted. Del Glover, the pirate, went to prison. And the listener, well, you could argue we got everything. So who do you think really won?